All right, welcome to the conversation. As some of you might know, honesty is not really rewarded in politics. We got another case of that in this situation. So let's bring on our next guest. It's Corbin Trent. He was actually the communications director of Justice Democrats. When Justice Democrats launched, he was the communications director of AOC in her congressional office. And he's now the founder of No Excuses Pac, Corbin Trent. Welcome.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So, Corbin, you have what is considered a controversial quote in DC. Now, I want to show folks.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said I've had a couple of those.
Yeah, you have had a couple of those, right? Yeah. And of course, the controversies surrounds the fact that it is obviously true, thereby making it more controversial. So, I want to show the quote and then have a fun conversation around it. You told Politico in an article where they were asking about whether Joe Biden's going to be primaried, quote, he's deeply unpopular. He's old as crap, let's say. He's largely been ineffective unless we're counting judges or whatever the hell inside baseball scorecard we're using. And I think he'll probably get demolished in the midterms. People will smell opportunity, and DC is filled with people who want to be president. Now, before I even get you involved, Corbin, I'm going to break that down real quick. DC is filled with people who want to be president. Can anyone argue with that part? No, of course not, right? Number two, he'll probably get demolished in the midterms. They actually, all the pundits agree, all the pollsters agree. So I don't know why that would be controversial. The judges are important, but it is inside baseball. Almost no not progressive, almost no Democrat really votes based on that. Right wingers do on pro-life, pro-choice issues. And he's been ineffective. Well, he hasn't passed any bills. He's unpopular, that's a matter of fact. And he's old, also a matter of fact. So let me start with a funny question. Other than the fact that it was blunt, do you have any idea what they're actually objecting to?
I think the thing is that you, especially something that's true, you don't talk about it. And the Democratic Party, the operatives there, and the media that surrounds them, I think have this sort of expectation that if they just stand still, that things are going to be okay. If they don't acknowledge things falling apart, then they're not falling apart. And when you call it out, I mean, I think the other quote that I had that sort of set them on fire was I said the cowardice of the Democratic Party is the greatest threat to human race. And I think they got upset about that particular quote for the same reason, that it rings true to people. And for whatever reason, like you say, you see poll after poll shows Biden's approval ratings dropping. He's deeply unpopular, and if we hadn't just been on the heels of Donald Trump, the most unpopular president in modern history, then it would be astonishing how unpopular he is at this point. I mean, it's right there with Jimmy Carter. That's the reason people are making these suggestions of a primary Tony, because there are some analogs to that. But I think the core of it is, if you're a Democratic strategist, if you work in this field, you're not supposed to talk trash about the team. You're supposed to be a team player, always. Never talk bad, never bring up anything negative. So.
Well, by definition, that means you should lie consistently, because sometimes Democratic politicians are doing great in polling and sometimes they do terrible. Yes. And if you assess why they're not doing well, that might actually help. But God forbid that should happen, because everything's about marketing.
That's the crazy thing. Like I am in a red state. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is a deep red part of a deep red state in a deep red region. But it wasn't always this way, right? Tennessee voted twice for Bill Clinton. Al Gore was the senator from Tennessee, and I'm not talking like we don't have to time travel to the 1960s when the South was all Dixiecrats. I mean, I'm talking in 2005, 6. Tennessee was blue. There was Democratic senators, Democratic governors. West Virginia had a Democratic majority in the state house, supermajority, until like 6 years ago. We're talking recent history here. The Democratic Party is losing people in droves. And it's not just Southern white males. people of color are leaving the Democratic Party across the spectrum. We're seeing people get turned off by the Democratic Party because they're embracing this sort of corporate agenda. They're embracing. I mean, right now I'm seeing all this controversy around maybe passing legislation that bars members of the House and Senate from trading in stocks, right? And that's controversial. Whether or not people that are making decisions that impact the market, that impact specific companies, should be trading on those specific companies is controversial. It's nuts, and the Democrats are out there fighting for that agenda. It's shocking.
Well, Corbin, let me get you in more trouble because we do speak truth on this show, and I don't think if you have cancer, for example, I don't think it's a good strategy by the doctor to tell you you don't. So let's be honest, right? Right now in deep red Tennessee, where you live, does anyone think that the Democratic Party is a working man's populist party?
I've not encountered any of those. I mean, so I'll tell you what's interesting about the Democratic Party where I'm at. They have meetings. In the county that I'm from has a Democratic Party, and they have meetings. They have meetings at noon at the country club. And I'm not kidding. That's when midweek at noon at the country club. It's not even trying to be the working man. I mean, if you have a job, you can't go to the Democratic Party's meetings because you're at work. So no, it's not fooling anybody. It's not even attempting to. That's the problem. And I mean, my family, I've got a family of union organizers on one side, and then other organizers on the other side. And what I don't understand is why the Democratic Party isn't returning to its roots. It's FDR roots, it's labor roots, it's building, it's building roots. It's roots of building a strong country, a strong party. When in this last election, you had one man at the top of the ticket, Joe Biden, and then Nancy Pelosi running to try to build a majority in the House. And both those people were going around during the election talking about how they wanted to see a strong Republican Party. Because in their minds, they were sort of running against Trump or whatever it was. I mean, to me, it makes no sense that you've got leading Democrats fighting for a Republican Party. I would like to see Democrats fighting for control of the government so that we can implement our agenda and improve the lives of the people in this country.
So let me get this right. You are correctly assessing a problem the Democratic Party has is wrong, but Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden rooting on a stronger Republican Party is right.
I think that's what they call 6D chess.
Well, they would have to go to 6 dimensions for that to make sense.
Yeah.
And Corbin, kidding aside, I mean, what the media and Democratic consultants seem to be doing is trying to paint you as being pro-Republican by criticizing Joe Biden. Is that correct?
I think it's correct that they're absolutely trying to do that. But no, I mean, I am the farthest thing you could probably find from a Republican. What I'm advocating for is a strong Democratic Party that can claw back places like mine, that can come back to being a party of working people, and can actually fight back the Republican agenda. Because I think it's a dangerous. The only hope I have is that the Republican Party is so devoid of any ideology, any ideas, and any drive, and their work ethic's so bad that even if they do beat us in the midterms, and then God forbid beat us in 24, we can still get it back from them because they won't do anything useful and they won't win the hearts and minds of that many Americans. So no, I'm not a coddler of the Republican Party. I think they are dangerous. I think they're, devoid of any good ideas mostly, and I think they're a party that's being led around by a demagogue right now too, largely. So.
Yeah. So look, what I'm worried to death about is that a Republican that's in the fascist camp, which there's now several of those, but they're not all in that camp. Most of them are still just normal corporate Republicans that do regular robberies. But if one of the fascists wins, like Donald Trump, then I'm worried it's the last election we're going to have. But in order to avoid all of that, you would think that Democrats delivering on some of their promises might help. But let me ask a little bit more specific question there. What's your sense of, in the South, what are the policies Democrats already have that if they did them would actually work, would get people to go, let me reassess Democrats. Maybe they're not elitist snobs. Maybe they're actually looking out for me.
I think there's tons, but I think one of the ones that would be most useful is childcare. I think there's a lot of people here that are paying really an extraordinary amount of their income towards childcare, babysitting, things like that. There's a lot of single moms, single dads that aren't able to participate as much as they'd like to in the workforce because of that. I think that's it could be a huge win. Now, I will say, though, that the other thing that I think the Democrats have done really well is this child tax credit that people are getting hundreds of dollars every month, right? But the problem is they're terrified of actually messaging on that. But for one thing, they just let it die. So they would have to figure out, why they let something good die. But the other thing is they were afraid of Fox News blaming inflation on their agenda and on their policies. And I think to me, that's the most irritating thing about the Democratic Party's agenda, even when they pass stuff, is they're terrified of their own damn shadows. They won't get out there and fight for the policies that they've even passed. They won't lead the message. They won't go out there and cheerlead their own stuff. They're always playing defense.
Well, Corbin, you were part of a legendary situation where you did fight back. You were one of the organizers of the sit-in that AOC did in Pelosi's office. And when you guys did that, did it put Green New Deal on the map like you wanted to?
The goal was to get one question in one presidential debate about Green New Deal. That's what we sat down and decided we wanted to do. And I would say that I think somewhere around 90% of the Democratic Party's candidates for the nomination were supporting Green New Deal in some form or other, including Joe Biden.
Look at that. It turns out when you fight, you can win.
You can win.
Right, but the Democratic consulting class, in their infinite stupidity, have decided that Corbin telling the truth is the enemy, and that if you just put more lipstick on a pig, that it'll somehow get the job done. I'm worried.
It's the same people that have been losing 1,000+ seats across this country. They barely clawed it back. And I tell you, the thing is, they got themselves fired up and thought, hey, we figured we solved the Rubik's Cube of how to win elections again. But the reality was they were fighting Donald Trump, who to me, that's who I credit for a House majority. That's who I credit for winning back the presidency. If they'd had a normal Republican, there's no way we would have done it. If they hadn't had, it was a golden goose in a lot of ways, But
yeah. Well, but they're playing with fire, as you and I both know, right? Yep. And so the more corporate they got, the more out of touch they got, the bigger a boogeyman that they needed. So they wound up with a big, giant fascist boogeyman named Donald Trump. And so, but if you play with that fire and you're not very good at your job, pretty much almost no Democratic consultant in the country is good at their job. All they ever do is lead to complete and utter failures. Well, if Trump runs again, that fire can turn into an inferno, because I wouldn't trust a corporate Democrat to run against them if my life depended on it.
And last thing, I'll say about that is that it seems to me that the strategy right now, at least nationally, is to run on saving democracy, right? January 6th, save democracy. Certainly if I turn on MSNBC, that's what I see 24 hours a day, basically. And the ironic thing for me is that if you walk around this, where I'm at, both Democrats, progressives and Republicans are going to tell you that they think that our democracy is broken already. They're going to point to things like, the fact that we've got an overwhelming majority of people that want to see gun control reforms. Nothing happens, right? It doesn't matter how many people want to see something happen in this country. If the money behind it doesn't want to see it, it doesn't happen. So, that's like they're trying to get us to save something that basically is already broken in a fundamental way anyway. So.
Well, that's the pig in the lipstick on a pig analogy.
I guess
the reality is the corporate Democrats take tons and tons of corporate money, and that is corruption. Yeah. And they're trying to cover it up and make it seem like we're the bad guys for pointing out something that people already know. Yeah. We're trying to help you fix it. And it's not like Corbin doesn't know what he's doing. He was part of the AOC win, which was literally one of the biggest wins in American political history. And so instead of taking that advice, they've decided, of course, as always, shoot the messenger. All right, Corbin Trent, founder of No Excuses Pac. Thank you for speaking truth to power and for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.